me. He's like, man, I don't know what to do because they're all convinced that we have the gold standard of election systems here. And I'm like, here's what you do. You don't fight it. You go up and say, we have the gold standard of the election system here, which is awesome, but I want to make it better. I want to make the platinum standard. There's our man. So Cole Christensen was a state rep in North Dakota. He's a Zoomer, Gen Z. He took this training from Center for Self-Governance.
And he's a truck driver, and he usually wears a baseball cap. And
no, a trucker's hat. A little bit different.
Hat and sports an impressive mullet. So.
So he took this training, used it to develop relationships to become a state rep, and then I got to tell you what he did. I looked up. These are things that pass, bills that passed in North Dakota in the last session. He was able to end mask mandates. He was able to get parents recognized as primary stakeholders over their children's upbringing. He was able to limit the state's ability to designate people as domestic terrorists. He was able to limit the governor's emergency powers. He removed sanctuary status from illegal immigrants throughout the whole state. He was able to solidify the definitions of man and woman, right? A man is biologically X and a woman is biologically Y, right? He was able to get raw milk producers to sell directly to consumers in North Dakota, and he was able to get
that's so huge.
That's so huge.
I mean, it's kind of ridiculous that has to be a huge thing.
And I mean, in the terms of Team Illuminati Overlord taking over the world, it's not like it's the top thing, but at the same time, it's like that's.
But it really seems to be.
Superfood.
It really seems to be like they act like selling raw milk is the most dangerous thing in the food
They
world.
act like selling raw milk has the same chemical danger as the fluoride that they put in the water that you drink.
Yeah.
And then the last one I had here, and again, this is what passed. We're going to talk about an example, deep dive into an example of what didn't pass. But school districts have to allow bathroom usage based on biological sex, and government can't require the use of pronouns when addressing somebody. That is all law in North Dakota now because Cole Christensen took some training and learned how to operate like Team Illuminati Overlord and got this stuff passed in the state of North Dakota. The key to this, the first step of the mindset we got to get our heads around is not being passionate about the issues that you're passionate about. What? Not being passionate about the issues that you're passionate about. So here's Team Illuminati Overlord does a lot to control us. I mean, there's a lot of different strategies to control us. This is one of the key strategies, is that Nima over there, for example, is 100% pro-abortion, and he loves killing babies, and that's the hill that he's going to die on. And Dylan Moore is a fundamentalist 6,000-year-old Earth Christian that believes that women should be barefoot in the kitchen popping out babies and that birth control is a sin against God. And by hell or high water, we are going to battle it out to death in the streets. Right? Yeah. And the goal here is I got to make sure that whatever the issue, I bring up abortion because that was like the one that I was, to get people, how hot can you get somebody in the least amount of time? That's a great one to start with, right? Is we need to get these two people fighting each other. And according to Team Illuminati Overlord, they don't really care one way or the other. For them, the state is divine. We just need to make sure that whatever we're doing is in line with what we think that the state needs, whether that's yes abortion or no abortion, right? And the fact that Dylan and Nima have an issue that they're passionate about says that they are incapable of higher thinking because they are not willing to set aside their immediate passions in order to engage in this higher thinking. So therefore, they're easy to manipulate because if I have agitator A over in the corner for who's on one side of the issue and agitator B in the other corner who's on the other side of the issue, it's very, very easy to get them to fight and not focus on a real issue. right? So maybe it's gun rights, maybe it's Medicare for all, maybe it's relieving student debt, maybe it's free, whatever your issue is. It's so easy if you're passionate about your issue, like that's the one thing that I gotta have, and that's where I'm drawing the line. And anybody who's against this is against the human race and needs to be battled. If you've got that mindset, you're so easy to control. You're so easy to control. And so by being able to sit back from that mindset and say, okay, wait a minute, I want to accomplish X. And in order to accomplish X, I might need to navigate through spots where I'm passionate about and it's against the thing that I'm passionate about. For example, gun rights, right? I'm passionately pro-gun rights, for example. And in order for me to get parents as primary stakeholders passed or mask mandates banned or whatever, I'm going to have to interact with somebody who's passionately against gun rights. Take all the guns away, right? The first thought is to say, okay, that person is threatening me to take away my gun rights, take away my ability to self-defense. I would never want to work with him. Well, now you're not going to be able to accomplish much. So first thing is you have to be able to disconnect yourself from those passions, right? And the second thing is you cannot fight the noble lie. The noble lie, to put it bluntly, is like the mainstream narrative of what's going on. Some examples of the noble lie would be climate change and anthropomorphic global warming. Another example of the noble lie would be COVID-19 was the most horrible disease that ever hit the face of the planet. The lockdowns were entirely justified, and the medical response was that the stabbies were the best medicine that ever came and touched the planet. That's ever existed. Another example of the noble lie would be on January 6th, Trump supporters attempted a coup and an overthrow on the federal government, right? And you're supposed to not question any of these things. And if you question any of these things, you just get squeezed out of the system. So how do you navigate against that if the entire system is set up where they got their ears perked? And if somebody questions the noble lie, and I'm talking particularly in policy-making circles, right? The state legislature, the such and such bureaucracy, where they're actually making real policy and real law to change the way that our system of society works. Those people, their ears are attenuated to somebody challenging the noble lie, and if you challenge the noble lie, they will all hold rank and push back against you. It's the way it's set up. I don't think we need to dive into why that's the case. Are these guys a part of Team Illuminati Overlord? Are they just brainwashed? Are they just going along with it because they're cowards? Doesn't matter.
I would like to suggest something, maybe to interject. The noble lie, I think, is a method that has been working for thousands of years because human consciousness has been at a certain level.
I would agree with that.
As 100%. You know, right? It seems to be the case that these noble lies are actually dying a very slow death around the globe.
In public, they are.
In public, they are.
But in the policy-making apparatus,
in the realm of policy-making, they're still sacrosanct. And so maybe there's gonna be a time in the next years, decades, where these noble lies die out. But nonetheless, this methodology that Dylan's going to talk about still applies. Like whether the noble lie is hugely successful or very successful or medium successful or mildly successful, it's a good method for as long as we live under this regime, I think.
Right. Well, and then I think what's important to point out is there's the public soap opera. Right now, the public soap opera is the presidential race by far, right? And I'm not saying that who becomes the president isn't important, but in terms of affecting like the structure of the system, you know, I mean, we talked about parents as primary stakeholders, whether or not AI gets personhood rights, whether or not city managers are an legitimate form of government, whether or not, hey, all the governors are attending these in quote private organizations like the National Governors Association, getting their marching orders, or not marching orders, but ideas from the WEF. Right, and there's all this stuff going on in the back scenes, and normally people are talking about, there's the CFR and the Trilateral Commission and the Bilderberg Group, and I mean those are things, but again I'm talking about the actual bones of the system. Like, here's the law that describes how the system works. Team Illuminati Overlord has a direction they're pushing that, and it's boring. It's mundane. You don't even know that it's there unless there's somebody like me jumping up and down, pointing it out to you, right? If you don't know the exact way that the system works and you're unable to point to it and say, here's the thing that we need to fix right here. Here's the word that we need to get control of or we're about to lose it. All that soap opera stuff is a distraction. And to Nima's point, yes, the noble lie is falling apart in the public sphere. Like in conversations like this, I mean, I guess there's still a significant amount of people who watch TV, which is tragic, right? But there's a significant amount of people who don't. And the ability to keep pushing that noble lie is crumbling and crumbling and crumbling. However, like I said, in the policymaking apparatus, let me give an example. Steve Dunkel recently was elected the county auditor of Mason County in Washington State, which is this tiny county, which you could say, who cares about that? Well, just like there's a National Governors Association, there's a Washington State Association of County Auditors. Well, where all the auditors in the county come together, and when they all come together, Mason County, which is by some metrics the smallest county in the state, the auditor there has the same vote and authority as the auditor of King County, which is the county of Seattle with like almost 2 million people in it. So in this Washington State Association of County Auditors, if you look at their website, one of their stated goals is to craft legislation in order to present it to the state legislature. Now, first and foremost, that should be a warning sign where it's like, wait a minute, no. You guys aren't supposed to be doing that. Get in your own lane, right? But on top of it, when you realize that this is just like the National Governors Association, where there's policy and influence and ideas being dripped in from sources like the WEF, if Steve Dunkel, and I've had a conversation with him about this, if he stands up and he challenges, hey, wait a minute, because Washington State has like, in terms of our voting, like which state is the most Swiss cheese in terms of the integrity of its election system? Washington State's like number one. We've got everything going wrong here. It's like literally the worst in the country in terms of how unsecure our election system is, and the auditors are convinced that we have the gold standard of the election system. Whether they believe it or not, I don't know. But if he walks in and he starts challenging at the Washington State Association of County Auditors, and he starts challenging that, they're all going to push him off and what's the word I want? Quarantine him, essentially. The whole purpose of these organizations, National Governors Association, Washington State Association of County Auditors, the National Municipal Council, or the National Council of County Governments, or what? I mean, these things are everywhere. Yeah. And they were dreamed up by a guy who wants to destroy the idea of a government that has separation of powers. And so when you have something where it's like, okay, here's the executive group, which is the county auditors, saying, okay, elections are kind of a big deal of what we do, and the gold standard of elections is to have mail-in votes and to have signature verification and register people by when they get their driver's license and da-da-da-da-da. That's the gold standard. Like literally, that's the term they use in Washington State. We have the gold standard of the election system. For Steve Dunkel to come in and say this is trash, yeah, they'll excrete him. I was actually talking to Steve Dunkel about this, and he said he was complaining. He's like, man, it took me a while because when he ran for the position, the mainstream media bombarded him as, you know, an election denier and a conspiracy theorist and a blah, blah, blah. So when he walked into Wasaka, everybody was like, who is this creep, right? And it took him a while because we kind of been coaching him behind the scenes, like, don't talk like that, to get them to warm up to him. And I was saying, and he was commiserating with me. He's like, man, I don't know what to do because they're all convinced that we have the gold standard of election systems here. And I'm like, here's what you do. You don't fight it. You go up and say, we have the gold standard of the election system here, which is awesome, but I want to make it better. I want to make the platinum standard. And Nima, don't you goddamn dare tell me that gold is worth more than platinum right now.
It's got to be diamond or something. Yes.
The point being, sorry, Nima, to interrupt you. The point being is that then you could start to direct them, and they're like, "Oh, you want to make it even better? Now we're listening," as opposed to excreting you because he challenged the noble lie.
Okay, what about somebody just coming here from California or wherever and picking up a ballot and showing some kind of utility bill from some random place and then getting a ballot? Or what about just all these random ballots being sent out to boating docks and to houses, to one...
I think the homeless are the big one, honestly. My suspicion is the homeless.
What about the password? Like the password is literally your birth date. Isn't that something that's really stupid, to make every Washington citizen's password their birth date? I mean,
well, I tried that one. You know what the answer is? Oh, but it doesn't matter because we have the signature. We have the signature verification match, which is amazing and can never be challenged. And on top of that, in order for them to do that, they have to sign under penalty of perjury. So they could be in a lot of legal trouble if they did that without, falsely. So we just assume that because there's a penalty for doing it, that nobody would actually do it. In the same way that because things like theft and rape and murder are illegal, nobody ever does it.
No. So that's a really...
That's their answer. It fucking drives me crazy.
So that's a really retarded way of designing a system that's supposed to be resistant against these attacks, right?
You are correct, Nima.
I know.
The problem is they will in unison, like fucking parrots, repeat that back to you all at the same time. That stupid answer. Yes,
I know. I'm just saying these stupid ass answers, they need to be recorded in public and they need to be hammered and blasted out the people for them to see how ridiculous this organization is, how ridiculous the system is. And over time, people pick up on it. And over time, you have to get people like Steve Dunkel in there and then others more and more. And then, things will hopefully change. But
and then I guess that's kind of the long-term play of actually breaking the noble lie, right?
Yeah.
For now, in the imminent, I wanted to focus on it's there and we got to work with it. Right. And I brought up Steve Dunkel as kind of a case point of, how he's working in here. And what I want to get to is where Cole Christensen, the North Dakota rep that we brought up earlier, actually wasn't successful in a bill. Because and then I actually asked him about it. And I'm like, why didn't this one get through? And he basically said, I had to pick my battles. Right. I mean, I had to decide whether I was going to focus on this or focus on that. And I wasn't able to focus on that. And in this case, that is the vaccine schedule in North Dakota for school children, right? And I popped this up and I read through it. We're going to bring it up. It's barely 3 pages, right? So we will be reading it, but it won't be that bad. This was so brilliant. And it's such a perfect example of what I'm talking about here. So here's Christensen as one of the sponsors. So this is a bill for an act to create and enact a new section of chapter whatever of North Dakota law relating to COVID-19 vaccinations and experimental vaccines for students at institutions of higher education, and to amend and reenact subsection 1 of whatever relating to school and daycare immunizations. So the first thing that he gets into here was, essentially making it so you can't force the COVID vaccine. And in case you're unfamiliar with a bill, any part that's not underlined is what the law currently is, and any part that's underlined is what is to be added or to be changed, right? So all this under COVID-19 and experimental vaccination limitations is something that he's proposing to add to the law. So an institution under the control of the State Board of Higher Education may not require a student to be vaccinated against the severe acute respiratory syndrome of coronavirus 2 or receive an experimental vaccine as a condition of enrollment or in-person attendance. So basically, this is banning COVID stabby mandates in North Dakota for specifically schools, right? And they're also not to promote it. The receipt of an experimental vaccine or the COVID vaccine. Now, what's interesting here is that he keeps saying COVID and experimental. COVID and experimental. So North Dakota is obviously a red state, and the red states were more aware of the situation, right, in terms of the COVID stabby. And what I see that he's doing here is that the hot anger and passion in the public is about the COVID stabby. But he's writing in right next to it experimental. He keeps saying experimental vaccine, experimental vaccine. We're going to see why that's important in a second. So moving on to subsection 2. As used in this section, experimental vaccine means a vaccine approved by the United States Food and Drug Administration, which does not meet the following criteria. So basically, it's experimental if the FDA approved it, but these other things have not happened yet. Number one, the pivotal clinical trial the United States Food and Drug Administration relied on to approve the vaccine evaluated the safety of the vaccine for at least 1 year after the vaccine was administered against a control group that received either a placebo or another vaccine that meets the criteria under the subsection. So that's fancy legal terms to say, in order for it to not be experimental, it needs to go through a control study like anything else.
This is so easy, right? I mean, this is the thing that should have been done everywhere for all, not just vaccines, all kinds of. It's done actually for most pharmaceutical drugs.
But the vaccines get a special get out of jail free card for this.
But right? Take one group that gets a placebo, take another group that gets this great drug that you're peddling, and give us the results. Give us the results, plain and simple.
Right. Okay. So yes, in order for it to not be considered experimental, you can't have this. Second, the Department of Health and Human Services has I'm assuming that this is the North Dakota Department of Health and Human Services, has posted on the department's website the injuries or diseases caused by the vaccine and the rate at which the injury or disease occurs from the vaccine. Like any other fucking drug is supposed to do. Right? But I mean, before we were recording, Nima just mentioned this, is that him and his wife have noticed on commercials that if you watch a normal pharmaceutical commercial, 2/3 of the commercial is listing the side effects, but if it's a vaccine, they don't.
Yeah, it's ridiculous.
Yeah, and we'll get into the liability protection here in a second. The third thing, the Department of Health and Human Services has determined the risk of the permanent disability or death from the vaccine has been proven to be less than the risk caused by the infection the vaccine is intended to prevent. So basically, the vaccine, if we compare the deadliness and the disability of the actual disease versus the cure has to be better than the actual disease, and you have to prove that.
Yeah.
Right? Again, totally reasonable. Of course, right? And then D, the vaccine manufacturer has liability, including for design defect claims for any death or injury caused by the vaccine. And as anybody who has cursory knowledge of the issue understands, vaccine manufacturers have extremely limited liability for damages caused by their drug, by their medicine, right? So what he's done here he hasn't challenged vaccines. Yeah. He just says, I want them to undergo the same process and the same rules as every other fucking medicine that we have in our system.
Yeah, no, they are saying these vaccines are great, and all I'm asking is for the ceremonial act of giving us the data that has convinced you that all these vaccines are so great. That's all we're asking for. Because you keep telling us, keep lecturing us. One thing I would question about point D is the vaccine manufacturer has I would have said unlimited liability. because they do have liability, but it's capped up to a certain amount. I wonder if they could use that.
That is an interesting question, and I know part of the CSG strategy, which takes it from Team Illuminati Overlord playbook, is you got to work in increments.
Yeah, or maybe it has proportionate liability
to get in the door. Yeah.
The vaccine manufacturer has proportionate liability or something like that. But there's a bunch of other safeguards before this one as well, right? So there's 4 different points.
Right.
So even if they can, make something up here, the other ones still have to be met. So
what he's essentially done here is, again, I said that experimental vaccine is really the key point here, not COVID-19. COVID-19 is what carries the passion that gets everybody interested in calling their state representative and their state senator to say, hey, I want this bill to pass, right? But the key here is experimental vaccine, and what he's essentially done with these criteria is turned every single vaccine into an experimental vaccine because none of them meet this criteria. Everyone, please like, comment, and subscribe to help us grow this channel. I think we cover a lot of good stuff. We're covering ideas that you're not hearing anywhere else. Economic ideas, historical ideas, systematic politics ideas you're not hearing anywhere else.